Hey guys, it's Jouelzy and it's time for another review of the most recent episode of Underground. Now before we get into it, it's imperative that you thumbs this video up, comment along, engage me in the discussion, and allow me to continue to do videos like this and ignore how many people do or don't watch it. Support by becoming a patron to my Patreon page. I have the 4C Natural Hair Guide, the guide for the kinky, coily, curly girl. Is it kinky, coily, curly girl who thought that baby hairs and sleek updos would spring forth? That is a long title, but I love it. $5 holla ebook to help you out with your natural hair. And then you can always shop SMARTBROWNGIRL.com. I haven't worn a Smart Brown Girl shirt in I guess maybe my last 3 videos. We're gonna get back to it though. Was my blush really strong? I did my makeup like a Snapchat filter, excuse me. Okay, this is going up late. I did plan on putting up 2 videos today because I want to be consistent with doing underground videos the day after it airs. However, Prince passing away at 57 is entirely, blew my whole high. I had to take a nap. I'm devastated. I feel like somebody I knew in real life, passed away. But let's get into Underground, though. This episode was rough. Girl. It was rough, but it was well done. Shout out to the cinematography. Shout out to Raphael Sadiq and the other chick that does the music supervision and taking these old Negro spirituals and customizing them to fit the scene and the feel and evoke such strong emotion into the episode. Up until this point, all the children in this show had been secondary characters, and the kids' amazing acting skills. These kids did it, and anytime you kind of deal with childhood, it's going to evoke a higher level of emotion because we do perceive children to be innocent. And I think a lot of times when we talk about slavery, we tend to only look at it from this adult perspective. There's a lot of parallels to the modern day African American community, and hopefully people are watching this show and kind of understanding it. It opens up with, you see this guy's hands and he's making Nico wafers. Now I looked up Nico wafers. They were a sugar candy that became really popular during the Civil War. I did a lot of rewinding this episode because I was so in tears. I was so in my feels that I was just missing scenes because I was wiping my eyes. The wafers kind of paralleled just something that's so simple and so innocent, and honestly, I can't imagine a sugar wafer in the 19th century tasting decent. It probably tastes like trash, but it represents childhood, and you see it in the master's house. You see it in the Hawks' house that are hiding runaway slaves. The white kids all kind of have access to it, and then it's constantly handed off to the black slave children as kind of like a consolation for their lack of humanity. And almost kind of a deceptive sense of childhood that they don't really have ownership over. The beginning of this that has everybody in their fields is James being transitioned from the house into the field. And this is a direct impact from the nasty-ass Reverend, the Reverend who is commandeering in the name of Christianity, in the name of the one above, that Master Macon needs to be more strict on his slaves. And so James, who is his own child, is sent into the cotton field where they've hired a new overseer who's gotten doubly strict because of the runaway. When Ernestine is talking to James and preparing him to go out into the field, and then in the background they were playing this song, and it was referencing Joshua, who was second to Moses, and he led the Israelites out of, where were they at the time? Girl, don't have me lying about the Bible. He is the one that led the Israels into Canaan. They walked around the wall that enclosed Canaan, and they blast their ram's horn, and the wall of Jericho came tumbling down. And this signifies the Jews coming in out of slavery, and then slavery was no longer condoned. This is symbolism of Joshua and the wall of Jericho have long held a very strong signification in the black church. I feel like I've heard, a few sermons about Rahab. Is that how you say her name? The prostitute that was in Canaan that was the only one allowed to survive. And there's a lot of motifs that tie into how the African American community has kind of risen up out of slavery. As much as people want to say slavery happened 400 years ago, this show is literally taking place in 1837. That's not even 200 years ago. And then I'm seeing James, he's 8 years old picking cotton, and I'm sharecroppers were a thing. Like, my family was sharecroppers into the 50s, like migrant worker sharecroppers. And then after that, you have other communities coming in to be migrant workers. Like, I don't even know that this sort of labor in America has ever ceased. I think some of us kind of wanted to slander Samuel for having the opportunity to run and not running. But I think, as you see in this episode, Samuel is definitely the person that thinks consistently about people outside of himself. I low-key think Samuel stayed behind because he knew how bad it would be for the other slaves. He stayed behind, even though he felt some betrayal by his mother. He stayed behind for his family. I'm so anxious to see where his character goes. Character development of August, the slave catcher. I'm just not a fan of him, clearly. So I really don't care about none of his backstory. Maybe they'll get into highlighting the medical history of the United States. We have not been that long out of practicing lobotomies. I don't know if they were referencing that August's wife had a lobotomy, because lobotomies weren't practiced in the States until the early 1900s. But I only know what phrenology is because it's the name of a Roots album, and they have the phrenology skull on the cover of their album. And therefore, I had to go, maybe at this time I was still using Netscape. I had to go ask Jeeves about it. I felt like they were referencing that they had removed her frontal lobe, which is essentially a lobotomy. I don't know that is historically correct, but nonetheless, it kind of shows just the depravity of how we view any sort of mental health in America, or even in the world at large, really. This is not the first time that they've showed a white woman in kind of like this effervescent, pure light. So I was so pissed about the treatment of James and every other slave on the plantation that when I see this country singing white woman in the field, I'm like, oh bitch, ain't nobody got time for this imagery. Ain't nobody got time for this. But it was a good ass country song though. I think they might have actually had a country singer sing it in that scene. I really don't have enough emotional fucks to give to try to delve into how I feel about the little boy, August's son. What's his name? Like Ben or something? And his relationship to his mother. Somebody tweeted me and asked me to talk about how August's son is more mature than his daddy. I don't think so. Another motif that I think is heavy in this episode is them showing kind of the loss of innocence for all these kids. Like the kids' transition. I think one, it shows that we all start out innocent, that every behavior is a learned behavior. That I do not have a long-standing expectation that August's son is not going to go after slaves or not be just as thorough of a slave catcher as his father. I don't personally feel like August is catching slaves because he feels like slaves need to be returned to their masters. I think he's catching slaves because it's an income for him. Kind of complexity in August's relationship with black people, in that one of his closest advisors is a black man. It shows the complexities that the relationship between blacks and poor white Americans. And I said this in the first review, a lot of the systematic oppression that has been ingrained in the culture of America has been upheld by the people that it least benefits. And it's this contrived ecosystem that they continually, and I mean up to 2016, and poor white folk going out and voting for Trump. It don't make no kind of sense, but they are the first ones to hold up this kind of picket, or not even kick, but like literally hold someone by the neck and keep them down, but allow people that don't give a fuck about them to prosper off of their hard work. So I'm gonna hold my entire judgment on his son until, we only have, 2-3 more episodes. Elizabeth and her husband, John Hawkes, who are the worst liars. The films that they're making for the slaves to be caught, and we never found out what happened to the last slave that was caught in the last episode of the white guy that came out of the chimney. Even with her finding Boo, who has gone through it. Was Moses, Boo's father, killed by the Native Americans? I think I was like at that scene too, so I really couldn't, I wasn't sure. He was shot with the arrow. Did he die from said arrows? So how do you think you're going to walk this little black girl back up the hill and not nobody see you when you know old boy, old frat boy, is checking for you? Did she give up the box for Boo? She traded her is that what happened? I am, again, so conflicted. We talk about the treatment of my people that is beyond humanity. I I'm having a hard time giving up that emotion to the white folk in this show. But like, oh, this is so icky. So now what's going to happen to Boo? Because this can't be kept up. I really was left with more questions and kind of answers, and I had a really hard time parting with my emotional feels to give to her. But that ish is we see that Rosalie, Noah, Kato, and Henry are somewhere in a Native American teepee, though there are no Native Americans around. There was some black guy who left them to go build a tunnel, which, I mean, I guess to a young boy who has been raised as a slave on a plantation, the concept of a tunnel being built through Georgia, like, would make sense. How? If there are no other Native Americans around, there's nobody to protect them, wouldn't they think that the white man's going to run up on them? No matter how deep into Native American territory they are, white men don't give a fuck with Native Americans. So them landing there and being that comfortable amongst themselves didn't make sense. But like, Henry took one for the team. I had a feeling that Henry was going to die before they got to freedom. The setup kind of was that he was always ready to jump into the mix for his counterparts. The previews for next week, I don't know how Kato, with half his face melted off, is fitting to disguise himself and people not going to know that they're the runaways. When Henry passed away, I just heard Come Sunday by Mahalia Jackson and Duke Ellington playing in my head, like, Lord, dear Lord of love, God Almighty, God up above, please look down and see my people through. It was just the most pivotal scene in this entire episode was the exchange between TR and James. It's set up by Samuel going into the master's office and saying that he saved up $100 to buy back the freedom of James. Now, James to raise $100, and we have to give a nod here. Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. That's a whole nother video unto itself. Harriet Tubman had taken $5 to buy her mother's freedom. $5. So for a slave to have 100 USD, you know how hard he had to break his back to make that money. Like, that is a major sacrifice. Macon telling Samuel that he's worth basically worth $500. TR witnesses this whole exchange, and then his father agrees to think about allowing James to go free for the $100. Who I don't trust nothing that comes out of the Macon's mouths, but whatever. TR is on his horse. He sees Samuel running away. It didn't make sense to me considering he had wanted to buy his brother's freedom. And then TR going into James' cabin and being like, I'm going to change things. And James knew better. James got hardened so quickly. His sense of understanding the direness of the situation he was in and how untrustworthy TR is. Like, in that moment, you see how easy it is, someone you perceive to have this level of innocence and joy and peace in them, how so quickly they can turn, because nothing about TR and James' relationship was honest or was equal. TR offering James some sort of different life in 10 years was simply to assuage TR's ego. And the moment that James turned down his nasty sugar wafers, this boy's feelings were so hurt that he then goes and snitches on James' older brother. In that whole moment, I knew there was nothing to trust about any of the words that came out of TR's mouth. He had 10 years. Like, you're asking someone to give more years than he has lived on this earth to living under these super dire circumstances so that you can maybe change some things for him. That was a lot. This episode was very emotionally impactful. Everything from the visuals to the acting to the music evoked such strong emotion from me. And just having the opportunity to have a semblance of a good childhood is such a blessing. And that my ancestors went through this just so that I could have some sort of joy that they were never given the moment to have. That is what really hit me hard. So I hope you're watching Underground. Let me know what you thought of this episode, and I will see you guys next week. Support Smart Brown Girl. Deuces.